Now let's take a look at how to create those custom reports, but based off of transactions. So similar to the reports based off of reservations, we're going to follow three steps, the exact same three steps, but with a little bit of a difference whenever we come to the available fields and filters, step number two. So this report that we're going to create in these three steps is an example of a transaction usage report. We're going to see, we're going to be able to look at a date range and see how many times a transaction code was used within that date range. So step number one is to create the report and header information. You're going to start from the report wizard and click the new button. In the report field name, we're going to enter in the name. This is the transaction code usage report. And we're going to select the based on field. You're going to change this to transactions because we want to have access to transactional fields. You're going to show this in the menu. So that's a drop-down menu of custom reports. And I'm going to add in a description, just giving a little more information about how this report is used. You'll click the next button and I'm going to add that title back in, the transaction code usage report. And for this header, I'm going to build a little more information into it. So I'll select the property variable, click insert. And then on the second line, I want to add address information. So from that system variable, I'll select address, insert. And then on the third line, I want to add the city, state, and zip code. So you can do that all in one line, just entering in those variables and adding a comma and space in between them so that they generate all on one line. It is optional, but it can be added to add a little more information to your reporting there. Great. So the next step, we're going to now select fields and add the filters based off of those selected fields. Now, because we're looking at transactions within a date range, I want to make sure that I'm selecting the transaction code date, the date that the transaction code was posted or recorded in Roomkey, and I'm going to use that date to build a filter based off of a date range, so date from and date to. We'll also add in some additional filter fields to allow us to specify what transaction code information we want to look at using this report, as well as the details of that transaction, things like when it was posted, who posted it, maybe where it was posted, like a res ID or reservation ID, just so that we can clearly see that information on the resulting report. So heading over to our Fields tab, I'll click the Next button. You'll notice that my list of available fields is a lot shorter with transaction-based reporting. Um, I just have access to transaction fields and reservation fields. So starting with my transaction fields, I want to start with the transaction date, my transaction code, that's what I'm going to be using for my filters, and the additional information I want to see on that report, including the transaction name. I also want to see the transaction amount, how much, what the price was for that transaction, as well as any reservation ID, so where that transaction was posted. And I also want to see the clerk that posted that or created that transaction. From the reservation section, I would also recommend adding in the status of the reservation. This can be helpful information on the resulting report. So I'm just going to scroll down to the bottom here and select status within that reservation field. Once you've added all your fields, you can now select next, move over to building the filter. So the first thing I want to do is build a filter expression off of the transaction date. I'm going to use that parameter and prompt using date from, select OK, and I want to add the transaction date expression date to. So also be a parameter and a prompt to the user to select a date to, so to bookend that date range. The last thing I want to do is also add in a prompt to the user to specify what code or transaction code they're looking at. So I'll select and transaction code and expression, and I'll use the like expression to select a parameter and prompt the user to enter the code or specify what code they want to see. Once you've added in your filter expressions, that is all that is needed for that filter tab. Great. So when you're building custom reports based off of transactions, it is a lot less data that you have access to in the Fields tab, and the filters tend to be a little more straightforward. So the filter was less complex than the reservations filter that we built previously. Now let's wrap up the building of this transaction-based report with step number 3. We're going to customize the columns, group by, and order by features. So to move on to the columns tab, I'll select the next button. This is now going to give me access to those columns, and I can format them or organize them as needed. So this one, I want to move the res ID up to the beginning of the report, closer to the top. So for the transaction date, I'm just going to simplify this title as date. Transaction code, I'm going to simplify that to code. And transaction name, I'm just going to call this name. As far as formatting goes, I want to make sure that I'm formatting my date and amount fields. Make those standard or however I prefer to see those. And I'm also going to add a sum for the amount field. The transaction date column, I'm actually going to hide this from the resulting report. I'm actually going to end up grouping my report by transaction date. So when I click the next button, I can move over to the group by tab and select tran date or transaction date. Lastly, I'm going to click the next button. Now, as an option, you may want to choose an order sort by order, but for this report, I'm actually not going to add that in. It's totally optional, and I'm going to choose to omit it and just click Finish for this custom report. Now you can see my custom report appears in my list of in my report wizard. Great. So that's a custom report based off of transactions. Let me go ahead and open up our test database and we can see what this report looks like. So once again, I'm going to go to my reports menu. This time I'm going to access my custom reports in the general section and select transaction code usage. Now I want to see all of the charges that I've posted so far this month in the month of October for flower bouquets. So I want to see what I've charged, where I've charged them, how much revenue I've charged so far for flowers. I'm going to use the date range starting from October 1st to today's date. And then I'm going to enter the code for flower bouquets. Now you do need to know what codes you're using. In this case, I know that my code is flower. When I click OK, that's now going to generate the report for me. Let me just zoom in here to make it a little easier to see. So just like we saw with the previous example, we've got the title information, name of the hotel. This time I added in more address information, just as an example at the top there, and the name of the report, transaction code usage. The other thing that I can see here are my filter conditions, so I can see exactly how this filter or how this report was generated based off of a date range from the beginning of October through to today's date. And then it's also based off of a transaction code, and I specified the transaction code flower in order to see all the times that I've charged for a flower bouquet to my guests. Now I group this report by date or transaction date, so the date that the transaction was posted. I can see that I posted charges for flower bouquet once on the 15th, and I have two postings for flower bouquets on the 16th. Now, using that sum column, I can also see the total amount for each of those groupings. So a total of $75 on the 15th, a total of $350 on the 16th, and in total so far, I've charged $425 for flowers in the month of October, month to date. Another couple of handy things that I can see here, I can see the res ID. Many properties may also add in the guest name, so the name on the reservation, where that posting was made. And of course, I can see who posted that. This is recorded under my admin RSI clerk ID. I can also see the status of the reservation. In this case, because we're posting charges, these are being posted to in-house guests. Right. Now, the nice thing with this transaction code usage report is that I've based it off of a variable code. So I can see how many charges I've allocated for flowers, but I can also use this for payment codes or tax codes as well. So if I want to see how many Visa payments I've recorded so far, I can use this same report from the custom report section, transaction code usage. And if I want to see how many Visa transactions I've recorded so far this month, I can simply enter the code Visa or whatever your Visa credit card code is, click OK, and that will now generate a Visa code usage report. So when you build these transaction code reports or reports based off of transactions and you have a customizable variable like the code field, it makes it very easy to use the same report to generate different types of results. So here, again, I can see I've got different transactions recorded for Visa payments. That just helps out. This might be very helpful for any sort of credit card reconciliation. If I want to do one credit card type at a time, that can be very helpful. One thing that you will notice whenever you are building reports off of transactional data, it does not forecast any future transactions. So right now I'm looking at transactions that have already been posted in the past or current date. It will not show me any forecasted transactions or revenue forecasting. This is based off of date ranges that are of the current date or past dates.